Hello, I'm here with Stephen Oyoung. How are you doing today?
I'm very well. How about you?
Doing great. So you have a deep filmography across a lot of movies, shows, games. We're going to be talking a lot about Spider-Man today. Obviously, you voice Mr. Negative in Insomniac Spider-Man games. As a big fan of the first game, I love that Mr. Negative was one of the antagonists in it because he's not a commonly adapted Spider-Man villain. What's it like to bring that character to life in what I would argue is probably the biggest Mr. Negative adaptation we've gotten so far?
I would agree with you that it's the biggest for sure. I do think there was a lot of pressure initially. Um, well, it was weird, right? Because, like you said, Mr. Negative wasn't really known, wasn't really seen in a lot of media. It was a relatively new character. I mean, he was 10 years old, but that was like, he was like the newest guy on the block. So with Insomniac, I mean, initially they had pretty free reign on the portrayal. And actually, what you guys saw in the final product was not the initial iteration of this character. When we first did like a test sequence with Mr. Negative, he kind of looked different. He spoke differently. He pretty much acted differently. And I think what they wanted to do was with the final product is kind of lean more into the themes that I think most of the characters in the Spider-Man universe possess, which is this push-pull dynamic within themselves, whether it's with good or evil, or with their heroic persona or their normal life. And so it was a lot of fun initially to kind of experiment, and then it actually was very liberating in a way when the creatives like Brian Intihar and Jacinda Chu just kind of sat me down and said, all right, we're doing this direction. Like, there's a nice you, and then there's the, badass martial arts, like, guy on a quest for vengeance you, right? So just tap into those two. Once I got that direction, then everything kind of fell into place and became what you see as a final product. And on
Mhm.
top of that, it feels amazing. I'll just say this, because yeah, Mr. Negative, nobody knew who he was. So when he was announced as the bad guy in Spider-Man 1, and we went to Comic-Con Hall H, I remember when they were like announcing me as Mr. Negative, I come out and there was like crickets, like total silence, because nobody knew who this guy was and nobody knew
Mhm.
who I was. And now it's amazing, like 6 years later, Mr. Negative is a household name. So to see that progression has been amazing.
And I think a lot of that's probably really a credit to your performance in that first game. I think you're excellent in it. You talk about like the balance between the good side and the bad side of that character. I'm curious, as an actor, like what is that process like? Because when we first meet Martin Lee in the first Spider-Man game, such a sympathetic, kind-hearted dude. If you really know Marvel Comics, you see Martin Lee, you're like, uh-oh, this is gonna go bad at some point here. And then, of course, by the end of that game, he is far from who we knew him as. So I'm just curious, what's that process like for you? How does that inform your performance?
Oh man, well, I personally think that we all kind of have the two faces to ourselves, right? And I certainly have it. I mean, when you get me, look, when I'm at work or when I'm with friends or I'm out in the public, like I try to be very nice, and I generally think that I'm a happy-go-lucky guy. And then you get me on the road, man, on 405 freeway. It's wild time. So, but
Yeah.
like, I think they saw a little bit of that as well in even the audition. And Brian Intihar tells a story, and it's like I remember I was so nervous going into this audition. We had this sequence where it's kind of like what you saw in the original trailer for Spider-Man, where Mr. Negative is on the roof and he's got some hostages, and he does some bad things. And I was so nervous. I wanted that part so bad. So I was really like tense, and the whole sequence was very dark. And once we finished the scene and I realized that I didn't really screw up, like I remembered all my lines, I was so happy. I immediately like jumped up into the air and I said, I defy you to find somebody better, right? And everybody laughed, and so I think they saw like, and then I realized like, oh my god, like what did I just say? That was wild. I'm sorry, guys. I'm so sorry. So I
Yeah.
think I think they kind of saw like, okay, this guy can bring the darkness, but he also can be joking around and having a good time. So, when Mr. Negative, the portrayal of Mr. Negative is kind of similar, right? He's very, very sweet and very, very nice. And then when it's time to cut loose, like, he holds no bars, right? So that's the approach that I took. Just be super sweet, and then, okay, now you can really just let go here.
Right. And that kind of leads into my next question because obviously Spider-Man's Rogue Gallery is up there with the best. You got Green Goblin, Doc Ock, Electro, the whole gang. What do you think it is that sets Mr. Negative apart from the rest of the bunch? Do you think it is that quality to him, the way that he can kind of just flip on a dime?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yes, I think what it is for him is he is almost like a good guy. He's a philanthropist. He's this nice guy who wants to do good things for the community, and then he has this incredibly dark side along with his obvious superpowers. I think that's really what sets him apart. He could almost be he could almost be an ally, but because of his tragic circumstances, he is pitted against Spider-Man. And obviously, his culture is the thing that separates him too. Especially a guy that looks like me, a guy with my upbringing. It was a very rare thing, when I was coming up in the industry, to be able to portray characters like this that were multi-dimensional and that you could sympathize with, and that were also still cool and could hold their own. So I think that's the big differentiator right there. And he just looks cool. I mean, he's got the suit. Come on, and he does the kung fu. Come on, like, who doesn't like that? Yeah.
All fair arguments. As we mentioned earlier, you have done a lot of shows, movies across your career. You've done some video games, so I guess I'm just curious, what challenges come with doing video game work where it's a lot of voice acting? I believe you do motion capture for the Spider-Man games versus more traditional live action in front of a camera acting.
Yeah, well, I feel like when you're doing just voiceover, the challenges that come with that are you're kind of like in a box. You might even be in a closet of your own, in your own house. Right? Yeah, exactly. Right. So you might be in a little bit of a vacuum there. So that's the challenge with voice acting. But again, they all come with their positives as well, because you're just using your voice. You kind of are able to go to places that you might not be able to do physically on the day, just in real life. You can be as wild and as big as you want. So that's always fun. And as far as like motion capture versus doing film, I actually think motion capture is very freeing, because you don't have to wait for reverse coverage. You don't have to do so many takes, because it's like, okay, we got your side, now we got to do this side. You don't have to wait for camera setups or lighting. You literally have a camera on your face, and you are in a three-dimensional space where they have cameras in 360 degrees all around you. You can do so many sequences and so many scenes so quickly. It really is like inhabiting the character in real life. For me, it's the closest thing. The only challenge to that would be you do have a camera on your face, which is very odd. So, like, if you can imagine putting a helmet on that has like a 2-pound camera just dangling off the front of your face at all times, you gotta ignore that.
Pretend like it's not there.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of a skill that everybody picks up. Everybody can do it. It just takes a little time, but that is the biggest challenge, I think, for a lot of people as well.
Yeah, I never thought of that, how it could be more freeing. You mentioned just technically, it kind of enables you to do a lot more with your performance. Springing off of something you said earlier, as a Chinese American actor, could you speak of the state of representation for the community in games, how far it's come, where you'd like to see it go, ways to improve?
Well, selfishly as an actor, where I'd like to see it go is for myself to get more work. Always, it's always that, right? But yeah, I mean, it's obvious. It's so obvious that the landscape has changed from when I was starting out. There are so many more opportunities. And people are still fighting for those opportunities. But now, yeah, you absolutely see, this younger generation of Asian American actors of all types of Asian, right? Not just Chinese. You got Koreans, you got Japanese, everybody. There are way more opportunities for them, and I think that's also a testament as well to kind of the behind the scenes. I think there's a lot more diversity within the writing, within the
Yeah.
directing, well, the decision makers themselves. And again, there's also this global entertainment now. You get TV shows from Europe and you get TV shows from Asia. South Korea is like dominating when it comes to dramas. So I do feel like the future will just have more and more diversity on the screen. And certainly with video games, that has always been, I feel like, the front runner for diverse casting, mostly because these are larger than life characters. It really doesn't matter what your background is. It really just, can you be these characters? Can you voice these characters? It's not even necessarily about the look. So I have nothing but optimism when it comes to the future for that.
Amazingly put. Thank you so much, Stephen, for your
Of
time
course.
today. Before we split out here, any projects you want to give a shout out to? Things people should be playing, checking out?
Oh man, I mean, besides Spider-Man 2, I just have one, a super top secret project. Everybody thinks I'm lying when I say this, but I'm telling you, it is a video game. It is a new property. It will be announced sometime, at least within the next year, I think. And be watching out for that. And other than that, support your local actors for our strike that we still got going on. Like, take one out to lunch or something. We need it. I don't know. So that's all I'll say about that.